Hey, good afternoon. It is Patrick Lovell Truth Bomb riffing on Sunday, October 15th at 1:22 p.m. my time. And I got to make this one really quick. The last one that I did, my last Truth Bomb riff was over an hour, but it's extremely important. And if somehow I build momentum and I start to get more likes and subscribers and people that are finding out what I am and who I am and what I'm trying to achieve, I would really encourage you to watch my Truth Bomb riff on really 13 as it relates to a tidal wave crusade to purge corruption and where I'm coming from in the whole deal. But it's over an hour, and in this incredibly short bandwidth reality, given all of the things that are coming at us left and right, in addition just normal times, but with the advent of a potential global war emanating out of the Middle East, I found compelled to try to keep this one incredibly short, and then just encourage you to like, subscribe, share, check out my work as Patrick Lovell Truth. At the work that I've done as an investigative journalist and a producer. The work that is the blueprint for everything that matters is www.thecon.tv, and I've also got another terrific podcast that I co-produce with my friends from the Real Progressives called The New Untouchables that you can find. You put those two things together, which is like 20 hours of information, which is rock solid on all of the evidence. You come to reveal the core of everything that everybody is missing in the context of everything that is unraveling yet again. And I have to just comment initially, which I just watch about an hour and a half of this interview, not an interview, a discussion. It happens quite frequently on a podcast known as The Gray Zone that's produced by a guy by the name of Max Blumenthal and his partner, Aaron Mate. I'm not sure exactly what the relationship is other than what I've witnessed in these podcasts. And they're both bright guys that have a position. And, I've listened to most of their, well, I shouldn't say most, I've listened to some of their stuff over the last, I don't know, several years. And, I kind of watch it just to understand what their positions are in how they frame things, because I find myself at times agreeing, but that's a very small percentage of the time, because a majority of the time with guys like these guys, I find them to be incredibly self-loathing and manipulative, and they reveal themselves from time to time, which underscores everything that I'm trying to convey to you. So really, where I'm coming from with my entire ideology is I'm an American, I'm a Reformed Jew, I'm not very religious, I have an understanding of history, I have an understanding, most importantly, of American history, really above all else, and I'm a champion of liberty and justice for all, period. I understand how the system works, I understand how it's supposed to work, I understand how you foster a rising tide raises all ships, premised on the integrity of law that maintains upward mobility, which is where I come from. Because when you look through the lens of history and you understand all the isms, or the types of power control and those sorts of things that have created the history that ultimately evolved into what we were able to be the beneficiaries of in the United States, which was a democracy predicated on the rule of law and integrity, which provides opportunity, which to me is the most important thing that exists in the constant sort of evolution of humanity. That has been undermined, and it has been betrayed, and it has been sabotaged, and it has been gutted and destroyed over the course of the last 20 years by the powers that be, that operate based on the things that I reveal to you, that come first and foremost through the sort of revelations of our financial system, and also the paradox, but of the revolution of the betrayal of the rule of law in the United States, which has just returned us to tyranny. That's all there is to it. But why did I bring up Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate? Is because they're intellectuals that certainly understand details of history, but if you listen to them close enough and you listen to them long enough and you understand where their come from is, it's very specific to an outcome. Max Blumenthal is anti-Zionist, and he is on the side of the destruction of the state of Israel. Full stop. I mean, he could talk about humanitarian this and that over the course of whatever epoch he's involved with, but interestingly enough, he finds a audience that's willing to listen to him because he's tied his sort of, I don't know, clickbait scenario to guys like Tucker Carlson and, quite frankly, MAGA, who's made up of a lot of, quite frankly, far-right neo-Nazis, whom most of them despise the idea of Jews. And then at the end of that sort of routine, it's peculiar in so much that so many on the right, from the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Lauren Boeberts and the, this and that, Ted Cruz, I mean, they're all in on Israel, which is incredible, but many of them kind of are in this vein of evangelicalism that has been, associated with Israel mostly from a biblical context, which is associated with the rapture, which would be the, destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people to, basically, manifest the second coming. I mean, that's their story. And so there's all of these like mental gymnastics, twisted friends of my friends, enemies of my enemies are my friends, and all of these sorts of kinds of things. And, what I'm just telling you straight up is that the whole manifestation of these problems at this moment are a continuation. If you feel like you're overwhelmed with chaos and it's like you don't know which way to turn, this has been the situation, quite frankly, from the dawn of the new millennium and what many people call the Nazis, right? I mean, since 2001, the kickoff was 9/11, which we never held Saudi responsible for what their role was in whatever their role was specifically. We'll never probably know, even though there's so much evidence that shows that the Saudis were deeply engaged with whomever was calling the shots to basically open up the front door for an opportunity to be able to successfully achieve 9/11, which led to what? 20 years of what seemed to be a continuation of the usage of fossil fuel as a global paradigm that undergirds the dollar's sort of global, reserve currency. Okay. And I don't want to go into the, all the details of that because I have done that in many of these truth bombs, but the story of Israel and the battle between Hamas and Hezbollah and, extreme elements of really everybody in a very extreme neighborhood of a hornet's nest where nobody wants to ultimately be the ones to be able to create a peaceful resolution because there's partners in peace, similar to the sort of, things they had to overcome in Northern Ireland, I guess, which they did to a degree, much more successfully than what we've seen in the Middle East. But look, man, in the Middle East, there's what's tied to it all is really what the entire global sort of paradigm is dependent on, which is fossil fuel. And, what I see from a personal basis that always confounds me and just pisses me off to no end, which I would love to see completely eradicated from the world, is this sort of enablement of these petro dictatorships that are religious theocracies that don't give, a tail or hinder tail to, any sort of society built on what we in the West celebrate, which would enable somebody like myself to become who I am and everything that I am, which is predicated on upward mobility based on the ability to get yourself through this river we called life to achieve what it is that our journey allows us to become. And, in that sort of paradigm, I look at it, it's something, whether it's Nazism or religious theocracy or fascism or Christo-fascism, any sort of extreme, top-down hierarchical sort of, you get in line and you play ball or you get beheaded. I'm against. I'm all about, basically the democratic dynamism that fosters people to live true to their gifts and their meaning to create a vibrant society, which is really what we're all about supposedly in the West. And you cannot have that when you do not have the integrity of law, which, as I continue to reveal to you, is we got betrayed, not just, and we were betrayed in the, the heist of the white supremacist, coup d'etat behind, the so-called, insurrection where Donald Trump was never the, the brainchild of the whole scheme. He was just a wag the dog, and he's said as much many times for all of the elements that were there the whole time, which were the Mercers and the billionaire white supremacist class that have hijacked the Supreme Court of the United States, much of Congress, and most of them are tied to the military industrial / fossil fuel paradigm. Okay, and they account for a big, a sort of piece of the billionaire class that's tied to that, which is of course tied to the Middle East, and they have been, I don't know, since the last 70 years since, the end of World War II, and everything that built Western societies and, quite frankly, the world. And now we're in this kind of paradigmatic opportunity to shift, or it's going to fall in on itself and it's going to collapse and it's going to further entrench the powers that be that have been there forever. And what I've been trying to reveal to you is ultimately a revolution of mind, body, and soul. But it's got to be done in a peaceful revolution with knowledgeable people that are equipped with the truth of the facts that I've provided to you on this monumental journey that I've been on for 13 years, which brought all of the aforementioned titles that tell you who did what, when, and how to create the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, that provided tens of trillions of dollars to the financial system, that destroyed any seemingly, systemic, paradigm of this democratic state that is, ruled by the law and the integrity of law, because it's not. So what it is it's just a shadow power of a facade that is controlled by this Borg of corruption. And everybody's souls are just, in this mental gymnastics wrestling match of, Orwellian language, most notably Elon Musk, who continues to put on memes of George Orwell, who said, boy, did I get it or what? Yeah, meanwhile, Elon Musk would be the face on the screen that was shattered into a million pieces because he is the autocrat behind the scenes puppeteering everybody, because this system that I'm telling you gave him that sort of power, which is ridiculous. Who voted Elon Musk to be in a position that he's in? The market? Oh, I don't think so. Because what I'm trying to tell you is, as much as I was a huge fan of Tesla, much of that could not have happened without the full faith support of the United States. But same with, SpaceX and everything that goes along with it. But most importantly, everything that made that possible in that particular era. If you've ever asked yourself, how was it that billionaires doubled and tripled their wealth during COVID? Well, this is how. Because the full faith and credit of the United States was used to basically backdoor and support and guarantee this financial class that has basically turned the world upside down, inside out, because there is no free market. There is no capitalism where we have creative destruction, and there's no integrity of the law, which means that we have tyranny of people that are puppeteering the world for an outcome that millions and millions and millions could potentially die as a result of this, not to mention everything that we're seeing as a result of people in the streets that are fervently anti-war, for example, that are like, Israel, don't create genocide, and all the irony that exudes because of what happened to create Israel in the first place, because, of course, 1,000 years of pogroms and anti-Semitism that led to the final solution, that led to the types of things that ultimately we're seeing perverted and upside down in a really weird way. But it feels to me like it's like, to the victors go the spoils. Like, I make the analogy all the time that it's like, you really want to understand this thing without having to study thousands of years of fucking history. Just watch Game of Thrones and see what Daenerys Targaryen was faced with at the end when she gave Cersei Lannister the opportunity to basically hand over power, and the citizens of King's Landing would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not saved so much as, they wouldn't become, collateral damage, so to speak. I mean, that was the whole sort of gist of it. But instead, Cersei cut off the head of her top advisor, and the rest is history. And she torch bombed, firebombed King's Landing as a metaphor for what the Allies had to do to Germany during World War II. War is not pretty when it comes to a situation where it's like, survival or death by all means. I mean, we're at that point. But the irony is that it's just a microcosm of what's happening around the world. That's why all of this stuff could domino into something bigger. And what I'm trying to reach tens of millions of you, especially those of you who find yourself compelled to go to the streets and be anti-war in a conflict thousands of miles away that doesn't impact you directly. Maybe based on your reaction to what you're seeing on camera, and you want to go to the camera to express yourself. Where CNN's pointing the cameras and all that sort of chaos that's happening all around us right now. Why aren't you aware that we've had a massive coup d'etat of a financial class that perverted and destroyed the world, that literally destroyed tens of millions of Americans, not unlike what many of you are claiming has happened to the Palestinians, in the occupied territories, and the Black Lives Matter movement and Me Too and all of these other scenarios are kind of tied to what it is that I'm telling you, which ultimately furthered the power to fewer and fewer hands. A lot of the Republican libertarian types that, support the billionaires claim, and they love to point out all the time that we're not a democracy. Why? Because what they say is that we're a representative republic, which means in their term that it's ruled by the minority because they gerrymander and then they use dark money to basically create the outcome of which, i.e., socialism is used to backstop them, ironically. That's what you don't see. That's what you don't understand. The United States is not a democracy. It's a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism, literally socialism, to backstop criminality. The largest racketeering scheme in the history of the world that was easily discernible to be able to create the indictments and the prosecutions with a functioning Department of Justice and FBI and SEC and all of the powers that be, but it didn't because we're that fucking corrupt. And that's what it all comes down to. So the rich got richer, yeah, cliche. It's a police state across the world. There is no democracy. There is no patriotic fervor for democratic ideals. There's no patriotic fervor for separation of powers for, a society that can function with common sense based on character and integrity, because they've thrown that out the window. They've thrown the baby out with the bathwater because the corrupt are much more vicious and much more determined, much more committed to victory than those of us who believe in a democratic ideal. That's all there is to it. That's what we're in the midst of. And everybody chooses sides based on their manipulation, based on how they're getting paid. That's the situation, and I've produced all of this information that we've now made free to the public after spending $4.5 million. And we didn't make a dime on this because we got basically censored by the beast, the Borg, that we reveal. And two, which is all of Wall Street and financialization and BlackRock and so much more that I could go into that I have with 415 truth bombs that are as relevant today as every day that I've laid down for the last year and a half, not to mention the work that I've done over the last 13 years. So what am I trying to get at? Look, people, I don't see what you get. There is no time left. It's 2023. It's not 1987. It's not 1991. It's not 1998. It's not 2001. All of those situations had, very big events that happened in that time period. We've been in chaos for the last 21 years as we're hurtling towards the ultimate existential crisis, which is the climate problem. And we have answers to all of this. And by the way, money is not the problem because you don't understand fiat currency. But it will become the problem if proxy dictatorships and petro-theocracies decide to play ball with undermining what it is that our system is predicated on, because we left the gold standard in 71 to create a fiat currency. But really the only problem we have is with productive capacity. But everybody buys into this, pretzel insanity that is just nothing but, scenarios to try to confuse the American people to understand how the system works to protect the people that are in control of it. It's ultimately Oz, man. It is. But the guys behind the system aren't some fun little guy that was playing a trick on people and then he was looking out for everybody's best interest. No. These guys have proved over the last 20 years that they're willing to let 9/11 happen so that they could, create 20 years of turmoil that has ultimately led to this with 2008 in the process and then whatever COVID was. This is all just stupidity is what it is, based on you, the people, not fighting for a seat at the table, which is a country of, for, by the people, because it's of, by, and for the corruption. I'm leading a tidal wave crusade to purge corruption, because if you, me, and everybody you see who believes in decency, dignity, and integrity, and beauty and sustainability, if we rally in unity, we will defeat the misery of tyranny. And we've got to usher in the clean new deal. It's a point-by-point manifestation of a paradigmatic change that should have happened right after 9/11, quite frankly. But here we are 21, 22 years later that ultimately, has just seen this story go from bad to worse. How much suffering do you want to endure? How much do you want to let billionaires spend billions to loot trillions? Everything is upside down, inside out, because you do not understand how the system works. And I'm bringing it to you. I'm bringing you the revolutions of truth that the entirety of media has hid from you, that the entirety of all of these guys in independent media that are getting paid by somebody to be able to get inside of this emotional sort of push and pull, and people go freaking nuts and everybody's got this and that. That's led to absolute chaos. And by the way, who in the world is going to allow this insanity with the MAGA zombie apocalypse with this freaking idiot Donald Trump, who's of course guilty of everything that they've brought charges against. But the reason that all of these people are behind him is why? Because they can't stand the system that we're in, and so they've got to like corral around people with these ancient sort of just what feels to me like it's simply tribes. Anyway, I could go on and go on all the time. Bottom line is, people, if we don't come together, if we don't, if we don't rally together in the tune of tens of millions of people, to get these answers right before the whole thing fucking triggers, there's going to be a lot of misery. There already is a lot of misery. There could be a lot more misery. I said this in like 2 of my truth bombs ago, right? Do the math. There was 75 million people approximately that died during World War II. There was like 2.3 billion people. You do the projections forward with 8 billion people, nearly 8 billion people on the planet. We're looking at about the entire population of the United States dying. And it could be a lot more than that if there's a nuclear war unleashed, right? And for what? For the powers that be to game the system to see if somebody's going to survive because they want to create the system for themselves? No, the full faith and credit of the United States was not created as a lender of last resort capacity to fund corruption. Do you have any idea what we could do if we, the people, rallied to take our country back from the freaking villains of corruption? Anyway, I don't know what else to say. Please like, subscribe, share. Please join us. Failure is not an option. Rise, roar, revolt. Onwards and upwards.